Hello and welcome to the introduction to JavaScript classes. What are classes in JavaScript? Classes are basically functions in JavaScript. In the implementation of ECMAScript 2015, ECMAScript is the official name for JavaScript. So in the 2015 implementation, some new features were added. And one of those is the way you create classes. They have added a syntax called class, which you use to create classes in ECMAScript 2015, which is also known as ES6. When you create classes using the class syntax, you do not introduce new object-oriented inheritance model to JavaScript. So this is an easier way of doing it rather than the old way, which is a prototype-based inheritance way. So you can look at classes basically as JavaScript functions with prototype methods. So they're kind of like a function constructor, but with a prototype method. The body of a class is usually enclosed in curly braces, and you can use a constructor to assign properties to a class. So the constructors inside the body of the class will initialize the properties of that class. Because classes are functions, you can define classes just like you define functions. So you can define, just like you have a function expression to define a function and also a function declarations. When you're using the class syntax to create classes, it consists of two components, a class expressions and class declarations. So there are two ways you can use to create classes using the class syntax. So here is an example of creating a class using class declaration. So here I've created a basic class called car. I'm using the constructor method, and inside the constructor method here we passed in some values here, and we are using this keyword to assign the values that we passed in here into the object for the class. So this is a way of creating a class using a class declaration. Another way is to use class expression. So that's it for this introduction to JavaScript classes. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. Hello and welcome. In this video, I'll be showing you how to define JavaScript classes using class declarations. So in my console here, I have defined a class using a class declaration. So to declare a class, you use the class keyword with the name of the class. In this example, I've given the class a name called rectangle. So notice here I've got the constructor function, and I've passed in the height and the width as parameters, and I'm using this keyword to assign a height to the class and a width to the class. So here I've given the value of height to height and the value of width to width. The body of the class is enclosed in curly braces, so you can see the curly braces here, and also curly braces enclose the constructor function. So within the body of the class is where you define the class members, such as the methods or a constructor. The body of the class is executed in strict mode. That is, code written here is subject to stricter syntax for increased performance. Otherwise, silent errors will be thrown, and certain keywords are reserved for future ECMAScript. So here, code you write within the class is usually strict. And then here we've got the constructor method inside the class, which is a special method for creating and initializing an object created with a class. There can only be one special method with the name constructor in a class. All right, so this constructor here is a method. A method is kind of like a function. If you have more than one constructor inside the class, you will get an error message. So that's basically how you create a class using a class declaration. Thanks for watching. Bye. Hello and welcome. In this video, I'll be showing you how to define a new JavaScript class using class expressions. A class expression can be named or unnamed. The name given to a named class expression is local to the class body, so it can be retrieved through the classes and not through instances. So in my console, I have created a class using a class expression. This class expression here is unnamed. I've not given it a name, but if I want to reference this, so if I do console.log and I pass in rectangle, I should get it output rectangle. Okay, so I've got the properties here instead of giving me an output. The reason for that here, I've did the console.log on the variable, but I have not added the name. So what I should have done should have been console.log, and then I pass in rectangle. Remember, it's case sensitive, dot name. Now it should give me the name rectangle, as you can see here. So this is an example of creating a class using a class expression, but in this instance I have not given the class a name. All right, so you can see here there's no name. I've just called it class. So I'm going to give you another example, but this time I'm going to give the class a name. The variable has a name, which is rectangle, but the class hasn't got a name. So here is another example of me creating a class using a class expression, but this time I have given the class a name. So I've defined the variable here, rectangle equals to class, and this time the class has got a name called rectangle2. Now if I do a console.log on the rectangle name, it should give me rectangle2 and not rectangle. So let's do console.log, and inside the parentheses I will type in rectangle dot name, and you can see it's giving me rectangle 2 and not rectangle, because this is an example of a class expression with a name. In this video I showed you how to create a class using class expression, and I showed you an example of creating a class using class expression that is named, and also another one that is unnamed. Thanks for watching, and bye for now. Hello and welcome to this video. I'll be showing you how to check a constructor's property. Every constructor function has a prototype property whose value is an object containing a constructor property. This constructor property points to the original constructor function. So I've got an example of a constructor function I've created here. So I've created a constructor function called person. You can tell it's a constructor function because the first letter is in uppercase, and then I've created an instance of that constructor using the var keyword, and I've called it person1. If I wanted to access the constructor properties of this new instance called person1, what I'll do, I just type in the name. I'll say person1 dot constructor and press enter, and you can see that gives me the properties of person1. It tells me the first name and last name. The reason it's only showing two properties is because in the constructor function, even though I passed in several arguments or parameters into the function, I only assigned two using this. So you use this to assign properties to the objects. I've only assigned two, hence when I called up the person1 dot constructor, it gave me those two properties that are assigned. Okay, so this new object I created inherits from the template, from the constructor function, which is the parent. Another thing you can check with a constructor property is that you can check the object instance of that property. So the constructor property can be used if you have an object instance and you want to return the name of the constructor it is an instance of. So for example, if I want to find out this object called person1, if I want to find out the constructor where it was created from, I could come here and just type in person1 dot constructor dot name, and you can see it tells me here that this object person1 was created from person1 constructor. So if I come here, you can see I've got this constructor function here called person. That's what it's displaying here. So person1 was created from person constructor function. Please note that the value of the constructor dot name can change due to prototype inheritance. In this video, I showed you how to check a constructor's property and also how to check what constructor an object was created from. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.